really want to hear about the beer.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great,
Yay.
great success. I had to go kick my kids off of their devices, and I think that helps with the bandwidth around here. But anyways, we'll get to it. I saw the first question of how to open this can. So, and sorry to any of you that haven't picked up your beer. I know there's quite a few cases of beer still down at the tap room. So if you have time to come down, I'll hold on to it for you, and you can just drink this at another date and enjoy it. But we're going to hold on to them for a while, and so you can have the opportunity to come pick them up. So you take the black can, there's a little tab on the top of it, the little red tab here, and you basically just pull that up like that so that it's upright, and you peel the whole thing back like that, and it pulls completely off so that you have a fully open beer can. It's like a glass of beer but disguised as a can. Pretty fantastic. This is called a full aperture can, and so that's what that means. It just fully exposes the beer, which is great because you can kind of get the aromatics and everything from the beer as opposed to drinking from a small hole in the normal cans. So big fan of these. I guess I'll first start with the style of beer. This is an export lager, which it's one of my favorite styles of beer. Although they're not super frequent over here in the United States. There's the full name for the style is Dortmunder Export Lager, which they were first brewed around 1870 in brewers in Dortmund to compete with the lighter Pilsners and Helles of the time in the German region. And this is around the time men and women were working like hard, long days in coal mines and steel factories, industrial heartland of Germany. And after a full day of working, a lot of these workers wanted something that was a little more robust in alcohol content than a typical, light ABV Pilsner or Helles. So that's basically what this is. It's a stronger ABV alcohol than a Pilsner, but very similar to like a German Pilsner, but just a little more grain character, a little more hop character, a little more bitterness, just a little more efficient, a little quicker to the bloodstream, and delicious. So you guys can go ahead and enjoy while I continue talking. It's really nice. So if you have a glass, you can pour it into it. If not, drink it from the can. It's perfectly fine. It is blonde lager. It's somewhat hard to see inside of there. But the style typically ranges from 5 to 6%. This one is 5.7 on the higher end of the style guidelines, which is perfectly fine. It's delicious, balanced, with perfect amount of balanced hops and malts kind of working together here. The brewery is the Freem Family Brewers out of, you guys all have the cans so you can read it on there. They're out of Hood River, Oregon. One of my favorite breweries going right now. If you've ever been to my tap room, you'll know that because I almost always have something on from this brewery. They typically do a lot of Belgian style inspired beers, a lot of German inspired beers, so traditional Pilsners, lagers, and Belgian beers, which are delicious, and they're very good at it. They were founded in 2012 by 3 ex-employees of what was called Full Sail Brewing in Hood River, and so Full Sail was one of the original microbreweries back in the early 90s when the first craft brewing, the second craft brewing boom kind of happened. And these guys, they've done nothing but won a bunch of awards for their beer. They actually won the best mid-sized brewery in the U.S. at the Great American Beer Festival in 2017. So they've been doing some very good work. If you're ever in the Portland area, it's about 45-minute drive to the east from there. really cool brewery, really neat tap room on the Columbia River. Very cool. And they just do everything that they brew everything amazing. Everything they do is good. Fantastic.
But I would love to. So
Yeah.
the notes for this that I used when selecting the book were that each sip balances pleasant malt sweetness with floral hops and a restrained bitterness. And I thought that was a good description. Mary's laughing, so it must have been pretty close on the book there. Let's get you unmuted there. What's your favorite thing to pair this with, Levi?
Me? Okay, yes. This is a very good food beer in the fact that it pairs with so many things, because it's just so light and balanced and neutral that it can go with anything. But if I had to choose something to pair with this, it would be maybe like a nice white fleshed fish, like a nice halibut, something really mild in flavor as well. It would complement that really well and not really overpower the delicacy of the fish. Just kind of complement it.
Okay.
Written by a young journalist named Adam Popescu, Popescu. And I'm guessing that, like me, you have always been fascinated by the Himalayas and especially Mount Everest. When Sarah asked me to do this book with you tonight, she didn't know about my little girl daydreams of Mount Everest. And as a child, I remember thinking that that was the only mountain bigger than the mountains outside my bedroom window. So, Sarah, you led me into a revelation about something I've always wanted to know more about. Adam Popescu was also fascinated by Mount Everest. He'd been there, though, and he'd become curious about the way people lived there. He's a 20-something young, white, American male journalist, writing somewhat credibly about a younger woman of color and her faraway culture, family, and development into womanhood. Like here, Nima's home place is highly formative of what she experiences and whom she becomes. She is a Sherpa woman living in the foothills of the Himalayas, a range so immense and a place so isolated, it is impossible for her to imagine any other existence beyond it. There are 6 girls born to her family, referred to by their father, not by their names, but by their numbers. Finally, he gets his forever desired son, which is a tragic part of this story. Nima and her sister, Second, are both betrothed to a young local Sherpa who stuns both families by eventually deciding that he only wants to marry Nima. This creates trouble, and Nima flees as her father's wrath comes down on her, thinking that the destiny that had been arranged for them all was going to be destroyed. Disguised as a man, Nima seeks work and is hired by an American woman journalist to guide their small group up to the Everest base camp. The journey is treacherous. Nima challenges the restrictions her culture places on her, through gender particularly, but in other ways as well, by doing the duties of being their guide. There is a little beer in this story because the places where they seek shelter at night, they mention it as beer, but it is not nearly as attractive as what you're drinking or what Levi is going to share with us. There are many contradictions of the region that are revealed through Nima's experiences. She is certainly sensitive to the trails strewn with litter overlooking these majestic views. She's sensitive to the Buddhist clarity marred by sexual oppression. And the tourism industry fuels the local economy while it simultaneously destroys the local place. As a young Sherpa woman, Nima grapples with her narrow, my picture of you went away. Um, grapples with her narrow social roles as the eldest in a family of 6 daughters in drought-affected village in the shadows of the Himalayas. The family's livelihood becomes increasingly precarious since her father was injured in an avalanche, leaving him unable to serve as a guide to the foreigners who come. So they've lost all of their family income. The marriage of his daughters is his only route to regaining the wealth that he has lost. And as a way to feed their family, he offers Nima and her sister, second, as polygamous wives to the well-known Norbu. Nima balks at the marriage. Even then, after compassionate and forward-thinking exposure to Norbu, he agrees to marry just her. He decides he will not take second. And this forces her to flee after her father blames her for the arrangement falling apart. There's an American journalist female named Val who's making her first trek on Everest with a small group, and she finds Nima disguising herself as a male guide. Val offers an unheard of sum of money for Kathmandu and pursue a more fulfilling life. However, her challenging encounters on the trail are threatening. The striking depiction of the difficult terrain and the cultural anomalies faced by Sherpa women is magnified in Nima's narration. Adam Popescu's novel, called Nima, is as much a composite memoir of the tragic optimism of the Himalayan youth as it is fictional account of a blossoming woman surviving the perils of both nature and modernity at the same time. It paints the power of the mountains and that of the human spirit. Reviewers are divided about this novel, but point out that times are changing in regard to the opportunities for women to be Sherpas or Siddhars. Liberties were definitely taken in the book to make the conflict more dramatic. But observers say now that overall it depicts life pretty accurately. It's a great book for detailing the daily lives of Sherpa and the Siddhars, with its depictions of traditions, cultural roles, and the beliefs held there. The description of the topography was really moving to me. And the vivid portrayal of which Nima lives. Nima herself is a reflection of a male author, a character of a different background and culture to boot. And he's not older as he writes as she is when the book ends. The book is a great introduction to the region, and it certainly fostered my wanderlust. It's also the story of the mountain. Certainly, it raises awareness of what first world climbers have done to the environment, especially with their plastic bottles and other waste, a problem not yet solved. It's a coming of age story about a young woman awakening, experiencing the good and the bad of Sherpa life, and coming her own life ahead. I recommend it to you.
So again, the book was Nima by Adam Popescu, and we have print copies of this book and also ebook copies to download. You can download ebooks for free through the app Libby, just with your library card. The publisher is Unnamed Press. They haven't released any audio of this, But sometimes they'll sell audio rights afterwards. That's not true. They haven't released audio rights to libraries. They have sold audio rights to Audible. So you may know that right now, libraries cannot purchase anything that Audible has created. But that's actually becoming like a court issue on the East Coast. So we'll be waiting for developments on that. If you have an Audible, it is narrated by Elizabeth Rogers, who, if you like her, she has quite the backlist. She has 150 different audiobook titles, and Knowles does have about 30 of them in the collection, 30 of her other books. So if you like her as a narrator, then good news, because there's a whole bunch by her. Colin wants to know, Levi, what beers, how they can find out what beers you currently have available in the tap room.
Yeah, sure. We have a website, so it's Angeles Brewing Supplies .store. It's kind of a mouthful. The best thing to do is go to our Facebook page at Angeles Brewing, and there'll be a link to our website and our tap list there. And it is. When
you Google Angeles Brewing, your website is the first hit, and it is very easy to find your website from there. I know right before I first approached you, you had some awesome stuff like mango and really cool things that I never would have imagined. So you've got a really great variety there.
Oh, thank you, Leslie, for posting that link down there. But yeah, thank you. That's my favorite part of having the tap room, is finding interesting things to put on tap and / drink myself. So
that's kind of like a little element in these programs, is that like I'm trying to think of books that I think would be interesting. And Rebecca asked, how did I select the book? What I do, the process for this is, like our 8 Books and Libations. Looks a little different nowadays, but the process is the same. I also order all the adult fiction, large print, regular fiction, ebooks, audiobooks, books on CD. And so while I'm doing ordering, which is something I do 4 days a week, I just write down titles that I think sound interesting. I try to pick titles that I don't think are going to get a ton of checkouts, but they deserve a ton of checkouts. So I actually have already working on my list for next time, a whole sheet here. And so whenever we schedule another Books and Libations, I'll get with the vendor. They give me a list of what we'll be sampling, and then I get the tasting notes, and then I look through the tasting notes for restrained, bitter, dark, flowery, and then I go through the books one by one and find one that I think has something in common with what it's being paired up with. So it's a little bit time intensive, but I love it. Everybody seems to have a super fun time with it. And I do think that they match up pretty well. So I can just imagine, if anybody wanted to read Nema and then take their growler or grenade or however we can do it now down to Levi to get filled up, and just every time you open the book have just a little more, I think they would go really well together. Let's see.
I agree.
I laughed, Sarah.
Yes.
I laughed when you were talking about the beer initially, because I noticed in the notes the balance in brewing art and the phrase floral hops and restrained bitterness, and I thought that is not quite what they were drinking in those huts on the mountain.
Yeah, probably a little bit different process.
We're lucky to have access to.
Yeah, we are lucky to have such a great selection here. Let's see. So one thing that's interesting, just completely by accident, is that 3 of the 4 novels for this this program series are debut novels, and this one is a debut novel. The author has an extensive extensive work history as a journalist, and he in 2013 did a 8-day climb up to Everest Base Camp at 18,000 feet. He did that as part of a BBC News story he was working on. And then he went back to the Himalayas in 2018 and spent several weeks tracking snow leopards. So he has he did a lot of research in the area. And Mary, I wrote down a little tiny note when you were talking about it, calling it a credible or somewhat credible. And it is, how can this white male American author be writing a story about a young female, gender nonconforming woman living in the Himalayas? And he actually addressed that in a news in an interview that he did, and talked about how he's a first generation American. He's only, his parents grew up in, he was a child of refugees. And so he focused on those things that we all have in common as humans, and as an immigrant family, or as somebody who's, coming from Eastern Europe and Western Asia. So I thought those, if you wanted to look for those interviews with him, it's pretty interesting. Elizabeth sent me a sneaky message and wants to know the novels for next week. No, we don't do that. It's always a secret. We'll just have to come back next Tuesday. And we will, like I said, we'll post the videos afterwards, and post the links and such on the Facebook page. So I think it's fun to keep the suspense. So we are just about out of time, 7:30. Thank you all for being here. Please remember to take a selfie maybe next time and send it to Dear Library Programs for Adults, our people sitting in a room listening to a lecture, which, while those definitely benefit us and are interesting and informative and contribute to lifelong learning, the pictures all look the same. So it's really great when we can have these more interactive, fun programs. And if you could help us out by just sending a selfie, I would super personally appreciate it. If you have anything else, you can go ahead and email me. I will put my email in the chat. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks to Mary and Levi for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.